All right, thanks everybody for coming through tonight. Tonight we have Ben Schleuniger from Orbital Operations. Came up from Long Beach, California. Thank you so much, Ben.
It's great to be here, man.
How are your travels today?
Long. Spend most of the day in the airport, but it's what you do as a startup founder. I'm getting pretty used to it at this point.
Yeah,
I get to come to Detroit and San Francisco.
All in one, all in one. So tell us, what does Orbital Operations do?
Yeah, really high level. Orbital Operations is developing high thrust space vehicles that can stay stationed out in orbit for military and logistics missions. I think the easiest way to think about us is that we are a rocket that is stationed out in orbit, right? Really just the design requirements that we stay out there for long periods of time, the kind of unique technology that kind of enables us for that is we do use liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, allows us to do very high thrust, extended range maneuvers. But normally, rockets can't stay out in orbit because those propellants are super, super cold. And so usually if you put a tank out into orbit and you had these really cold propellants and they were getting hit with sunlight and radiation, they would start to boil. And in order to have the tanks not pop, you would just have to start to vent them. So traditionally, you can't be out there for more than maybe a week at most. And so we have some core tech that allows us to stay out there for extended periods of time, which happy to dig on into, but I'll keep it as high level for now.
I have a bit of a script, but I'm going to go off that for a moment. How long can you stay out in orbit, roughly?
I mean, we're designing for zero boil off, right? So really staying out there for, a couple of years at a time. The initial kind of design requirements we're really looking to do are, first vehicles will be probably a couple of years. We'd love to get to a point where we're really like 5 years that we can stay out in orbit ready to do rapid maneuvers, whether that's, various different mission sets. I won't just jump straight into it, but plenty of both logistical and military applications.
I don't want to go into specific threats quite yet, but why are you out in orbit and what are you protecting? Why does this matter to us here terrestrially? Why should Americans care about what you're doing?
It's easiest to just describe like what's out there, right? And I think in particular, we really look at, I think of satellites as infrastructure, right? And so you have low Earth orbit. That's that first layer where you're in orbit. Quite frankly, those are like very proliferated constellations. You can think like Starlink for internet. But there are really critical pieces of infrastructure that are much farther out in medium Earth orbit and geosynchronous orbit. So with like GPS or positional navigation and timing, right? Like that's a really critical piece of infrastructure that we have out there, very far away, very hard to get to. But you also have, communications, both, naval communications, military communication, but also just like standard kind of commercial communications as well. You have naval command and control. You have weather tracking satellites are usually really pretty far out there. You do have some imaging that goes on out in those higher orbits. So really critical pieces of infrastructure that kind of affect our everyday lives.
How about like national security perspective?
Yeah, I mean, everything from GPS to naval communications to nuclear command and control, right? Like if any of those were affected, a lot of our operations would be pretty critically affected. And they are very far out there. I don't think it is, we kind of grew up in this, what I call like the international space station age of space, right? Space was hard enough as it was to just be out there, and it was a very collaborative environment, and that has very quickly changed. I'm sure it's been changing in the background for a long time, but it really feels like it's come to the forefront in the last maybe like 5 years. Maybe the creation of the Space Force really kind of was seeing it as going from a sanctuary to a domain that is contested.
I know that we've been keeping an eye on one specific adversary. China has, I believe, 7x the number of satellites they've placed into orbit over the last 10 years.
Yeah, and the operations that are being pulled off by all a couple of geopolitical adversaries, the remote proximity operations that are going on out in these higher orbits. This is really pretty rapidly come to the forefront from being an experimental type of maneuver and understanding and kind of a theoretical field to like it is operational, and remote proximity operations, getting very close to satellites, even grabbing satellites is like now becoming something that is probably going to be more and more commonplace.
And so your customers are paying attention to that, being the Department of War, right? And so how is that feeding your requirements for what you're building and
Yeah,
Astraeus platform.
For us, and a little bit of background on how we kind of came to be. We have this super high thrust extended range space vehicle. We can go from low Earth orbit all the way out to geosynchronous orbit. We could even come back to low Earth orbit, right? So that's why I really try and stay away from the terminology of a satellite, because we really, even highly maneuverable satellites kind of maneuver within their range where they're not transiting large orbits like that. We really looked at kind of the logistical applications first. But I think the more we talked with guardians within Space Force or talking with Spacecom, Air Force Research Laboratory, Defense Innovation Unit, I think we really started to understand like we were developing a technology to rapidly move out in orbit, which is not something that is currently available. In a new domain, I always think like information is key, right? So we kind of repeatedly hear, and these are public solicitations as well, like imaging, right? Like reconnaissance, like what is going on out in orbit. And, space domain awareness is it's kind of its own field with, telescopes or in-space imaging, but it is really challenging, one, to keep track of things out in orbit, and then two, to get like high resolution photos of things. So you have to get close at some point. You have to do those remote proximity operations and just understand when a new satellite gets launched out there and it's moving close to other satellites, you don't know what it can do. And so I think the first thing is just getting information. That's the repeated kind of demand signal that we are hearing is, and particularly for us, like a LEO to GEO reconnaissance vehicle is something that is really not possible right now. Or if you try to do it with standard styles of satellite propulsion, might take months at a time, and we can do it in 6 hours, right? So that's where the really big demand signal's kind of been for the most part. And whether it grows from there, like any domain, like it grew in naval or it grew in airspace, wait to see. I mean, when planes first came about, the military was saying the only thing planes will ever be used for is delivering mail. That is clearly not what happened in the end. So very, very growing and very, very new territory for sure.
Give us a sense of the urgency levels here. Like how quickly do we have to move based, relative to our adversarial philosophy?
I think capabilities came online very quickly. I think definitely in the public eye, they came monumentally faster than people were thinking that they were going to come along. I think we just had this understanding that we were like the most advanced in a lot of these operations and vehicle designs. It's urgent for sure. I think we're seeing a world where we could be challenged on a lot of these operations, right? And that's not always been the case for space. That's very rarely been the case for space for us. I don't think we're necessarily behind, but I think we see the pace that others are coming up, and we see a world where 3, 4, 5 years from now, if we don't meet that trend and we don't keep ahead of ourselves, we're going to be on a peer-to-peer plane that's even, and you never want to be on an even peer-to-peer plane. So I think developing those capabilities as quickly as possible in the next couple of years is really important. And you're seeing that with like innovations or initiatives from like DIU and others, right? It's really fielding that technology right now. What can we get out there in the next like couple of years? So high level of urgency, I guess, is the short version of what I just said.
Always. So I did some research on you, Ben. It's not like we worked together in a previous life.
No,
right?
You knew nothing about me. It's clean slate.
Knew nothing about. We don't have like common battle scars. Nothing like that.
A little trauma bonding.
Maybe a little bit. I have a quote here from you. We want to outpace, outmaneuver, and outlast the other assets that are already out there. So with that, I'd love to nerd out about the Astraeus platform. I'm saying that correctly, right?
Yeah. Well,
okay, cool. Yeah.
The Astraeus platform.
Like talk to us about that and the modularity behind it, its capabilities. Let's dig in.
Yeah, I think we see the tech that's currently online for satellites, right? These very storable propellants, these satellite propellants. There are small gains to be made in the thrust or the range of these assets, and we're really looking to 10x, right? We're really like 100xing the thrust, and we're really 10xing the range. So, I kind of hinted at it before, but really storing it's really rocket propulsion, right? Heritage style, turbopump fed, liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen rocket. But the kind of core differentiating technology is, in essence, like a refrigeration cycle that is on orbit. Very similar to what's here on the ground. This is not like necessarily groundbreaking physics, but it has not been demonstrated extensively out in orbit. There's been maybe 1 or 2 applications of this kind of refrigeration cycle that have flown before. Definitely not at this like power level to be able to really keep liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen from boiling off at all. I kind of thread the needle here because, one, I don't want this to seem fantastical, right? Like this isn't like a 10-year project. But at the same time, it is cutting edge engineering execution, right? So we have to develop the liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen engine well underway with. Every time I can post a hot fire, I'm going to do it because it's always super cool. I will also post when we're going to be testing the cryogenic refrigeration cycle. It's not going to be quite as sexy. It's going to be watching a tank get really, really cold over the course of a couple of hours.
That's sexy.
You'll see me cheering as I watch a graph do it. But I think there's a lot of very high-speed motors and heat exchangers and turbo expanders. We use something called a reverse turbo Brayton cycle, and so it is going to be one of the very few active refrigeration cycles out in orbit. A lot of cooling cycles are pretty passive, right? You either have like a copper tube and you let the heat conduct along it, or maybe you have like a two-phase fluid, or you have ammonia, right? And it's kind of passively moving. We are like putting energy into this system to actively cool. And I think it's really the only way, otherwise the radiators would just be massive, right? So we trade off adding a little bit of power, adding a little bit more solar panels so that we can reduce the radiator size down to be practical and actually store these propellants out in orbit. And that's how you're really going to wind up with a rocket out in orbit ready to do all of these different mission sets. The only other note I'll kind of make, and the differentiating factors, we really see this as a platform. Right, we really see it as different loadouts. We always talk about the C-17, right? Like the C-17 on the military side of things, very like logistical, very useful plane. You have the KC-17, same exact plane, but for refueling planes while they're flying in orbit, or not in orbit, in the air, right? But just a different loadout with the same platform. And then you have the AC-17, which is a tactical loadout of the exact same plane. We really see Astraeus as kind of something similar there, right? We have this super high thrust extended range vehicle that we could do logistics with, or we could do a reconnaissance with, or we could support space-based interceptors, right? It's a high thrust extended range vehicle out in orbit. So I think there's tons of applications where we're going to become a movement layer. This platform is going to become a critical piece of infrastructure that's out in orbit, and you'll have critical satellites that are meant for station keeping and doing their things, and then you're going to have, I don't know what to call it. It needs a new category because there's high maneuverability satellites. This isn't that. This is like an ultra maneuverable platform or something along those lines. And I think you're going to need that for space-to-space services as space becomes bigger. And it's always been space for Earth services, in my opinion, up to this point. And that's really where we're becoming that infrastructure layer there.
Do you feel like you and Ross would have come up with this solution had you not been part of a launch vehicle program? Like, do you think that inspired the solution versus backgrounds in pure play satellites?
Yeah, I mean, for one, it's a rocket that we just made the design requirements like it's got to be out in orbit. But I think we saw launch really coming online, right? Like obviously SpaceX has been around for ages and been critical. We were part of Relativity, right? And I think that rocket's going to come online. I think Stoke is ready to come online. Rocket Lab's developing their rocket. Like, I don't think getting to low Earth orbit is going to be our problem necessarily, or at least won't be in maybe in the next couple of years. But a lot of these rockets, particularly if they are fully reusable, which I think is actually the way you want to go, right? You want vehicles that are good at cutting through the atmosphere to get out there and then coming back. But they're heavier, right? Because they have to deal with air, because they have to deal with re-entry, like they have to have aero surfaces. They're really good at getting to low Earth orbit, but not necessarily better at getting out to higher orbits, because now they have all this you don't need aero surfaces or heat shield tiles once you're out in deeper space, right? Once you're beyond low Earth orbit. Ross and I really saw an opportunity and a vision, and borrowed from a lot of original, like Wernher von Braun, like NASA style thought processes on what space was going to be, where low Earth orbit is the water's edge, right? It's going to be where you transition between two domains, right? As we see with land and water right now, where you have harbor and you're going to have a lot of business at that edge, but you're going to need vehicles that are good at transiting from that water's edge in space much farther out, and then able to come back and refuel and be reusable there and have the split be at low Earth orbit. That's always been like the core thought process and maybe the differentiation compared to how others think about space that we've had.
So who do you compete with?
I'll break it out into the kind of two areas. So you've got logistics. So we start there first. Like, we are helping satellites that want to go beyond low Earth orbit get out there cheaper and faster, right? They could take advantage of these fully reusable rockets and go to low Earth orbit, and then we can grab them, ferry them out to higher orbits, drop them off, and come back. That's like the ultimate goal we'd really want to get into, make it refuelable in low Earth orbit. It's almost like a new category. You could say that it's maybe like where like Falcon Heavy or some others were really servicing for a while to get out to those higher orbits and direct insert into geo. But it is a little bit of like a new piece of infrastructure that is going to create a little bit of its own market there. So I really don't know of any like direct comparable there on the commercial side. I think on the defense side, we will never be told this face to face, but it is always hinted at. It's a lot of mission sets on like the X-37B, right? Now that's the space plane that's been around for decades, right? It's been around for a long time. That is maybe the only other high thrust vehicle that's out in orbit. Now, not quite. It's not using liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, so it doesn't have the range, doesn't have the thrust. But that is what we normally get compared to indirectly in a lot of these conversations we're having with kind of our defense customers.
Let's go to like internal operations. Let's you guys are moving at pretty fast pace. You post pretty publicly your hot fire campaigns, and they're fucking awesome. I send it to our Slack message every single time I see it. Or our Slack
you guys
channel.
enable it, You guys make it go a lot faster.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. How do you engineer an organization to move at that speed, especially early on during development? Perhaps let's start there.
The kind of like easy cop-out answer is the team, right? Like Ross and I really wanted, and I don't even know if this is a term, but I always call it like dumbbell recruiting, right? Like we really went to the top guys that we have worked with, that we know were amazing engineers, and heavily recruited them, right? Like really sold them on this, really wanted to offer the adventure of building a business. And they're very involved. And that was part of the pitch, is people want to be involved in the building of this company. I really make sure that our kind of senior engineers that we've really brought on board, that there's a lot of transparency on like what we're going after as a business, right? That was the kind of adventure that they were looking for farther along in their careers, and amazing. The other side of the dumbbell is, we really have like an amazing intern kind of cohorts and pool that we're pulling from, and now just starting to really hire from. And I think it winds up giving you kind of the best of both worlds, right? You have people that are amazing. They've known how these things have done before, almost designing rocket engines from memory at this point, right? Like this is my third rocket engine development. It's a lot of our team's third or fourth time that they've gone through clean sheet all the way to like executing an engine. But you bring in these new, fresh ideas as well, right? And you bring in this like excitement on the industry and this level of like learning and understanding that kind of keeps it fresh almost. I don't know the best way to describe it, but it really brings the right energy there to help support and teach people up. And it's amazing what some of these, these college rocket clubs and others are doing. They have top tier talent, with just a little bit of guidance from some top tier people. Like you really wind up with just this amazing team. And so that's kind of the easiest answer there. Did pull a decent amount from Relativity. I thought for the ups and downs that we had, there were some things we did really well on the engineering side. I thought that the level of like analysis versus like get hardware rich, that was always a term we were using, right? Like get as hardware rich as possible, like go and test things.
An engine a week.
an engine a week. You got to be melting components, and you've got to be testing your heat exchangers, and you've got to be spinning your pumps. Like, you need to get into that as quickly as possible. You need to build the infrastructure to be able to do that. Your test cells, or for us, it's our rocket engine test trailer, right? And building more test site now. I think we have a similar balance there of do the analysis on the things that need the analysis done with, do the design reviews when they're needed, and make sure we have the right documentation, but get into test and like start testing things and get hardware rich. We focus very heavily, and I think this point skipped over pretty easily, is, if you're going to get hardware rich, you need to be very scientific in your testing methodologies, and you need to record data, and you need to record your procedures almost religiously, right? Because if you just go out and you just randomly melt a bunch of different components, but you didn't record things, or you didn't like keep it exact T and only change one variable at a time, then you're just melting things for the sake of melting things. That's definitely been lessons learned on the past there, where too many variables are changed all at once, or we didn't have the right test setup. So there's a lot of focus early on to make sure we had that really locked in. Revision control has been awesome this early on. I gotta compliment you a bit, because it really has been amazing, right? The change of things and the tracking of things, if you're going to get hardware rich, hyper important. And I think that point I think people just say, well, do as much hardware as possible, and I think that point gets skipped over. That if you don't record everything, then it's useless.
There's like a fine balance between having control over what you're doing versus wild west. I mean, we go through that all the time too, even in software land. So, and also I know a few of the fellows on your team from the relativity days, and
I think everybody has had their stint at relativity at this point.
You have some absolute dogs, man.
It's a good team. Ross and I were taking people out to dinner and really convincing as much as possible. And there were definitely a couple of no's before there were yeses. But I think what we're doing is really interesting. I think it's a new market, and I think it's the opportunity to really take the experience that these guys have had and build something brand new. That's not an opportunity that comes along every once in a while. So we got a good team. It's exciting, and good people bring on good people, right? It gets easier and easier the more you build up from the base of like a really skilled team.
How do you shift now? Like, how many of these units are you gonna have to build annually at scale? Are you thinking about manufacturing whatsoever right now? I'm sure, knowing a few of the guys on the team, they are. I've spoken to them personally about that. But how are you thinking about that? What are some of the struggles that you foresee in the future? I mean, we go back to, many don't know, but like Ben and I were going through an engine development program during the peak of entirety of COVID. Many supply chain issues. Technicians getting sick at a supplier, and they're 2 weeks late. I won't name any names or talk about any particulars, but
the trauma bonding, yes.
Oh, the trauma bonding, yeah, the war stories. How are you thinking about that moving forward? Like, is there a supply base that's ready to rock and roll here? What are you doing in house versus out of house?
Yeah, it's a multi-layered question. I think the core kind of IP stuff we definitely want to be able to iterate on quickly, and I think that being able to have a lot of those pieces in-house to be able to manufacture is really important to us. We are starting to get our first DMLS 3D printers. We just put one on order, and it's coming soon. We're going to have CNCs in-house. We're going to be able to do those things that require rapid iteration, because I think that we're trying to field things very quickly. As we were talking about in the beginning, it needs to be fielded very quickly, and to do that, we have to iterate quickly. That leads a lot towards development pretty heavily right now. I think for us as well, it's a balance in what the needs are. I think on the logistics side and the reconnaissance side of things, I don't think we're going to wind up being, a multi-thousand vehicle constellation, right? I think that there's a world for that. That's not me advocating against that. I think there's a need for that in the domain of satellites, but we are that maneuverability platform. We want to get to a point where we have a fleet, right? That's how we really want to talk. Less of a constellation, more of a fleet, and be operating those vehicles. Now, in the beginning, it's going to be, getting vehicles up there quickly and doing the mission sets that we need to go do. We bring a lot of capabilities, even if it's disposed of at the end of life, or maybe the first few. But it is in works in both the engineering side and what we want to go test to make these refuelable and reusable, right? Coming back to low Earth orbit and trying to refuel those. We're talking through some partnerships and some technology right now to be able to do that, because I think we've seen it with SpaceX, we've seen it with plenty of things. If you have a more singular capable vehicle, not disposing of it at end of life is important for the economics of things. I think that'll mean that those really complicated cryo management rocket engines are maybe slightly less productive, not hundreds per year, right? Maybe a couple per year. We're going to get to a point where refueling tanks are going to be like very important for us. One of the benefits, nerding out a little bit here, is liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. It's just the components of water. Right. So my background, I had started at Marshall Space Flight Center doing some work, and then went to SpaceX, and then obviously was at Relativity, early employee. I was there for 7 years. But even at Marshall, I briefly worked on the water electrolysis unit for the International Space Station. So the way they get breathable oxygen on the station, they don't send up gaseous hydrogen bottles, they send up water, and then they run some water electrolysis. Honestly, a pretty simple process, power hungry, but pretty simple, where you split it into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. They throw the hydrogen gas overboard, basically, and then they keep the oxygen for breathing. For us, we could send up water tanks. Now, I don't need the cryo management system. It's a singular tank. Water is super, super dense, so we could fit it in pretty much vehicle agnostic wherever we wanted it to go, and run water electrolysis, which is a simple process. You basically dock with a water tank. You put the whole thing into a spin. You run your water electrolysis. You'll get hydrogen and oxygen, self-pumping, no pumps. You get a standard membrane, and you get hydrogen gas and oxygen gas trickling into your vehicle and condensing down. Now, it's a slow process. Might take a month for a refuel or 2 months for a refuel, but I think there's a ton of advantages there. And super nerding out, like long-term
nerd the heck out, man.
Water is going to be one of those like first things that we're going to get from the South Pole of the moon or from comets or other things. That's like one of the key elements that's essential for us being out in orbit, not just for maintaining human life, but also it's rocket propellants. When people say like you can make water from rocket, that's what we're doing. It's liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. So I do think that is like it's going to be a critical resource out in orbit. At this point, I don't even remember the original question because I've gone off on such a tangent. But happy to circle back if I didn't actually wind up answering what the question was. Good.
Yeah, good
cool.
enough. Gold star. We're in San Francisco. There's a lot going on here. Amazing, amazing stuff. Why should engineers here in the Bay Area or anywhere be interested in working for companies like Orbital Ops or Heliux? Or there's an entire community, there's an entire ecosystem that's being built right now. Why should folks choose this path?
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time. I mean, anything from the space domain to the energy sector and to robotics. If we're talking kind of hard tech, my area starts to get limited in the robotics side as it comes on over. But I think there's kind of a bit of a revolution going on there. Obviously, skill sets across the board have to be pulled together. I mean, this vehicle we're designing to go out into essentially deep space. The communication lag is so long that it's pretty much going to have to be autonomous, right? Like there's going to be tons of image processing and decision making that is going to be very focused on the software side of things.
You can pull from other sectors and industries. Like there's.
I mean, the world of autonomy right now is just also exploding, right? And so I think there's a ton of really critical skill sets there that we are going to wind up needing. And then on the mechanical side, I mean, we're putting an industrial cooling cycle out into orbit. That's, as far as, standard thermodynamic mechanical engineering goes, that's very different than what's been done in the past. And it's a rocket that's meant to be out in orbit. It's a new domain that it feels like we're expanding out and into, and it's really, really exciting. I feel like you guys get the advantage where you're really touching every sector, right? Like you kind of get to see the full swath. So I don't think you're going to have trouble recruiting there. I mean, the software that you guys are building kind of branches across all of these, hard tech sectors. I feel like you're going to get the opportunity to see a lot of really cool things, and we only get to do so many amazing things in our life and our career. And I think doing important work should be what people, who care about their careers really care about. I think I think that it would be an easy sell to me, at least. I'm selling myself.
You need a job? No, well said. I completely agree. And I think Ben's hiring, by the way, for those out there. Always hiring. We're hiring. So please come check us out. Orbitalops.tech, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I memorized that domain. And Heliux.com. So thanks everyone for coming. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Schleuniger. Yeah, we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys.